Thank you. So I thought I should start just since I've been working here since about January with Mr. Sedlacek and the people at COM, with 4CT who've been managing the process, and with Burian and Trivinka. And we have made some progress, but there's a lot to do. But I thought I would start telling you a little bit about what I believe in. Then I'm going to talk about a way of thinking about building cities. Then I will go into one example in a great deal of detail where we have built a district the same size as the South Center. And then I have some quite specific recommendations. And it's been very interesting listening, because for both the former speakers, for Peter and Christoph, I've worked with both of these structures also. And the form of structure, we call it governance. How are you going to govern the development? The form of governance is maybe the most important thing you have to answer before you really start. And there's not one way. It depends on how many owners, what the political context is, and many other factors. So, first of all, who we are. We are 25 architects and landscape architects who solve urban problems with design. Our purpose is to engage people and nature together in cities, because I believe that nature is restorative and exceedingly important to the health of a community. Our projects make a difference in communities. The only reason we work is to change communities, to help people have better lives. We are designers that are very passionate about this, but most important, we like diversity and the uniqueness of every city to try and make those cities healthy, sustainable, and just. Because one of the biggest problems we have in cities, especially in America, is an increasing gap between the rich and the poor, an increasing gap between who has access to services, who has access to beauty, who has access to public space, and so on. So our mission is to bring these things together to make things more healthy, more just, and more sustainable. Now, I have a little joke, but you'll like it. I call this being alone together. Because people come to public space to be with other people, but they're alone. I guarantee these people don't know each other. They're just here because they enjoy being in a social condition in a beautiful place that makes them feel good. So I have 3 powerful goals that I always work for. One is to do everything that a designer can do to improve the health of society, to make society more diverse, inclusive, and open. Number 2, to do what a designer can do to improve the health of an economy, to make that economy accessible and equitable so that people can have jobs close to their home, so people can have jobs of different kinds, so different kinds of jobs can be together, so different kinds of people can be together. Now, design cannot solve all of that, but design has a role to play. And then, very important, to have a healthy environment that is balanced, interconnected, and resilient, because without this, the rest doesn't matter. So, city building, a way of thinking. We think very much from the bottom up, not from the top down. That means that we always first think about what is the real nature of the place. We have here a beautiful river, and it's quite wild. What is the ecosystem? Because that is the foundation of sustainable life. If we don't think about the ecosystem, we will fail. We will not sustain life. Each place, such as this river, has what I call an eco-structure. There's a structure to the topography, to the soils, the geology, the hydrology, how these processes work, and how habitats and a mosaic of different species come together and inhabit a place. And we are one of those species. Human systems are the foundation of sustainable cities. So we layer the human systems on top of the natural systems. And we cannot think that one is more important than the other. They're both very important. They're both very complex. And it's amazing when you work with ecologists like I do almost every day, how little ecologists understand about the ecological systems. It's almost scary how much they don't know. I was just in California working with a research center that's doing a 100-year experiment on carbon sequestration. They're in year 25. They have 100 acres of ground with all sorts of different crops and methods to see which ways of growing food will help capture carbon and put it back in the soil. And after 25 years, they have no conclusions. And these are scientists, so it's stunning. But I would also submit we really don't understand human systems very well either. And we have to keep working on that. Social and political systems frame the organization of culture. This is critically important because I work in so many cities. Every city is different. Every city has a culture. Every city has different aspirations and different limitations. And cities also cycle. Very important to think about where you are in time. Connectivity activates culture and economy. I grew up in Chicago. I grew up right here. These are all the trains in 1920. That connectivity is crucial to how use is distributed, how people move, how goods and services are distributed, and how value is created or lost. Mobility and access have to operate on top of connectivity to enable this diversity and equity. So many cities are built without the proper mobility to create that access and equity. History gives meaning to a place, and we have to think about history. Even empty land has history, and we have to know it. Form and structure organize activity, so form and structure are actually the result of these other layers that I've talked about. So many of us as designers, we like to start with form. We want to draw the line. We want to draw the district. But in fact, this is a result or consequence of understanding these other layers. Design is a response that is set in time. We were here 2 nights ago in the castle, an incredibly beautiful room. I'm sure you all know it. But it is a product of time. It's a product of the thinking of the time, of the social conditions of the time, of the economic conditions of the time, and the technology of architecture of the time. A different time would create a different place. So one of the most celebrated public projects, which I've worked on myself, is a response that's set in time. If we come back in 50 years and look at this again, somebody else will do something different because the context through time will change. So we always have to know how we work with time. So cities are shaped by design in their time. So the Noli plan of Rome is responding to the technology of the shovel, the brick, the hand, and the shoe. And that's what we had to build the city at this time. So the city is intensely compact and not highly organized. Other people at other times think they have other ideas because they have other ideas about technology and how people should live. We have to be very careful that we aren't imposing our new personal will or new clever idea on something that, in this case, did not work. So what time is your city? Where are you? Where is Brno in time? Where has it been? Where is it today? What is the next step? And how can you capture the best of the next step and minimize the failings of the next step? So, this is my case study in Denver. I did my first project in a district that, this is downtown, of course. The district is a little behind the picture. But I did my first project here in 1986. I've done at least 5 plans for this district. As Peter was saying, you do the plan again and again and again. So in 1990, this was our time when we focused on this. What were the problems? We had a failing downtown. Retail was falling apart. In 1982, there were 5 major department stores downtown. In 1990, there were 0. They were empty and vacant. Commercial rents were falling. 30% of the commercial space was empty. So we had a bad condition. This little red arrow is always going to show you the train station. So there's a river, and it's like a little crack in the city. It's a river, but it's pretty small. But the city started right here, and soon the trains came in the valley, and finally in 1880 they built a train station. So watch what happens over time. Here's the station again, right here. There's the river. Here is the core of the city. And we had all of this land. This is what it looked like in 1995. And my office was right there. And it was there since 1983. I spent 10 years trying to figure out how to take this empty land and turn it into something good. So the goals that my office set in 1995, this is what we believed. If we could connect the city to the river with a park, we would have a reason to bring people. If we could create urban connectivity to connect that district to the surroundings, to its context, we could enable mobility. If we had a network of public space to bring people in, and as Peter said, to have beauty, relaxation, and socialization in public space, we would have a framework for living. We needed quality architecture or people wouldn't come. We needed 100% new streets and new infrastructure, 0. We needed new transportation, none. And we needed to revitalize the railway station. In 1995, the railway station only had 2 trains every day. One came in the morning and one left in the evening. So you had to be very patient. And of course, we wanted to attract residents and business because I believed, and I was actually the primary activist pushing for this district, that if we needed to revitalize our downtown, this empty land was our opportunity because it was too difficult to change the land in the existing downtown. So we did this study pro bono, meaning for free. And what we said, very simplistic, if we could build a chain of parks and restore the river to make the river attractive to nature and people, we could then extend through the rail yards, consolidate the train, so this is our proposed future for the train, and build a neighborhood that connects from the water back to the city. I carried that plan around for a few years, and finally, there was actually a tender to do the plan for this big area, and we won this tender with a team. And this is just one of 100 drawings. But you can see it starts with these connections that you see, which were created, revitalizing the train station, actually increasing the number of trains, of course, consolidating the trains in the middle. And I'm going to take a little bit of a deep dive into how this worked. So for the master plan, we worked with neighborhood organizations. There were 3. We worked with the Downtown Denver Partnership. That's a business organization for downtown. Businesses and property owners, they all are members of this organization, a fairly forceful group of people. We had an advisory group of stakeholders. These are property owners, the railroads. There are 4 different railroads here, and so on. We worked with the city parks staff and the planning office staff. We held public meetings. I actually led about 40 public meetings, and everyone's been talking about the need to involve the public. I have actually led over 1,500 public meetings. Those meetings led to work with the staff to start to make a real plan, which we finally got approved at the Planning Commission and the City Council. So this page was 5 years. We then started implementation with many partners. We rebuilt 2 kilometers of the river, including habitat establishment, free-flowing water, and flood protection. We built 10 kilometers of trail along the water. We moved the railroad tracks, so we have 3 railroad tracks. We built this large park that brings people to the water and restores, about 40% of the park is restored native habitat. We built bridges to connect over the railroad and over the river, 7 bridges total. We now have about 6,000 people living adjacent to the park. And how did we pay for it? First, we borrowed money actually from the city hospital because they were very wealthy. And in 90 days, we bought all the land for $16 million, about 18 acres of land for the park. We had a very wealthy private individual who loaned us $8 million under what's called a letter of credit, which meant that the land that we just bought was collateral for his loan. So we leveraged our own loan. A little risky, but we did it. We sold another $8 million worth of bonds on Wall Street. We sold $6 million worth of other city property. We had a lottery. We got $2 million from them, but they put a conservation easement on the park, so we could never do anything in the park, could never have a building in the park. We got this all approved by City Council, and then the city engineering staff led the implementation of the park. So you can see it's done. So residential development surrounds the park. Commercial development surrounds the station. You can see the station hiding right in here. It's clustering up. This picture is now a year old. So if I just go back here, sorry, this site is this building. Oh, it's just for fun. There's the train station again. And here we're reconstructing the tracks and rebuilding the station. We have mixed use with residential. We have mixed use with office and retail. We have all new streets and infrastructure. And how was it governed? The planning department was responsible for the management of everything. We have a special district zoning, which we actually drafted. My office wrote the zoning, that included design standards and guidelines. Then I personally chaired a design review committee that included the private sector as well as the public sector to review every private project for quality. Each project then was taken to Planning Commission for approval for the planning permits. There was an agency task force that we established. All of the city and state departments came together so we could coordinate the delivery of infrastructure and transportation. And again, the city engineering staff led the implementation of the streets and the infrastructure. And how did we pay for it? We created a tax increments finance district which collects future retail sales taxes for infrastructure. We are able in the states to create a special tax assessment district so that commercial properties pay a small tax into a local district to support quality, not infrastructure, but quality, streetscapes, plazas, public spaces, enhanced lighting, wayfinding, and things like that. We had a major set of partners for different agencies, so we had the state helped with the transportation and the flood protection and so on. We based all of that around a phased infrastructure plan. We worked very hard with all the partners to determine which pipe to build first, which street to build first, which railroad track to build first, so that we knew if we built phase 1, the private sector would respond, and the private sector development would be paying taxes into the new district so that we could start to see revenue coming as we were spending public money. So very complicated. It's a 30-year cash flow analysis that we did. Then we had a phased entitlement plan. We were very, very worried that this would only become residences. So we created in the zoning that the first 500 units were the maximum. And that once the developers, and there was not one developer, there were several. Once the developers produced 500 units, they had to build at least 500,000 square feet of office space before they could build more residential. So we had this stepped approach, which forced the development of jobs, which was half of the objective. And it worked. This was probably the most controversial and risky thing that we did. So today we have about 2,500 dwelling units and about 2.5 million square feet of commercial space that has been achieved. In the master plan for the station, there was too much infrastructure on the surface, so we put the buses underground. The trains are on the surface, the buses are underground. The station has been revitalized into a mixed-use center filled with restaurants and a hotel and a beautiful plaza. So the assessment district paid for the plaza. And this is what the station looks like today. Very, very successful. So here is the site in Brno. You can see it's very exciting. They're, I think, mostly rabbits. It's very large. You can see the cathedral in the background. So how would I suggest you go about this? So I always go to, and I've been fortunate enough to work on several different governance models in several cities. So I always go to what are the issues that will allow us to have successful implementation. We have to start with money. We have to prove to the public that we will exercise fiscal responsibility. That means there has to be a fair partnership of public and private investment. It's not the public pays everything and it's not the private pays everything. There's some kind of sharing which has to be agreed to. There has to be phasing that builds value and recaptures those gains. So you can't spend all the money first and then wait for things to happen. You have to go one step and wait, 2 steps and wait. There has to be parity of public and private benefits. So as you spend public money, you have to create public benefit and private opportunity. And when you spend private money, you have to create private benefit and public opportunity. So there's an overlap of these outcomes. In terms of the buildings, you have to think about the form, purpose, and use, the architecture, material, sustainability, and cost. This is some of the more simple things. In terms of public realm, you have to think about the program and purpose of the public realm, and it's not very simple. This is maybe a very difficult task. You have to think about design, again, material, sustainability, and cost to build, but also cost to operate, because somebody has to pay to operate this public realm for a long time. You have to think about infrastructure and its capacities, connectivity, operational requirements, and again, what is its cost of capital and operations, because that costs money too. You have to think about the environment. How are you going to repair an environment which clearly has been broken? So there's integrity to the environmental systems. You create diversity and connectivity for soils and habitats. And again, the environment costs money too. Then you have to have responsiveness. You have to be able to respond to the stakeholders, to the public, and to public policy, which changes over time. Public policy is not static. And you have to have accountability. So there has to be tracking and reporting. There has to be transparency, and there has to be recourse. In case somebody screws up, there has to be a way to fix it. And all of these things have to be thought about at the beginning. Oh, I'm very, very creative with text. This is just a simple way of reminding us from a public sector perspective. I'm mostly speaking from a public sector point of view. The public is extremely concerned about controlling the money carefully. The cost of the buildings is mostly a private issue. The public realm is something that both share. Infrastructure, repairing the environment are generally more public than private. But responsiveness and accountability have to be in both places. So you can't let the developer hide behind the public, and you can't let the public do anything that isn't transparent. So you have to have parity between the accountability and responsiveness of both sides of the equation. So the tools that I suggest are, first, regarding money, development agreement or agreements. This is something we do all the time. It's a contract between a city or an agency and a private entity as to who is going to pay for what are the performance expectations, and what is the recourse if it doesn't work. Buildings, public realm, infrastructure, and environment are all subject to design, should be subject to design review, standards, guidelines, and procedures, and that's a shared responsibility. Both the public sector and the private sector need to participate in reviewing that design and ensuring that quality. And then communication with stakeholders and the public is also shared. So how might you do this? One way would be to say that the role of the city administration is to administer the development agreement. We strongly urge a full-time person in the mayor's office who does nothing but coordinate across the city to make sure that somebody's paying attention and every agency is performing. A task force of every agency that has to be involved so that people are assigned to the project, so they know the project, they know the details, and they know the troubles. And then have the project assigned to a committee of the city council, so the elected officials also have to be somewhat accountable to understand what's going on and to pay attention. I think that COM can play a strong role in two other issues. COM obviously needs someone to manage it, a committee to review design, and a project architect or engineer who is looking at every detail. And of course, this may be more than one or two or three people. To handle all of this, and it seems to me that COM could also be the clearinghouse or the center point of two-way communication, up and down, in and out. Just like the JCB that Peter, that you recommended. I think a JCB, you suggested something I thought was interesting, to buy the land. For a JCB to be effective, I think it needs to own most of the land. Here, that's not the case, and I don't know whether there's an appetite to buy all the land simply to create that power. So what I'm suggesting here is you've got to create an organization that meets all of those different issues and puts the authority and responsibility in the right place for each issue. So that's an overall view of that, and that's my way of thinking for Brno. Thank you.